human resource, I believe, will survive if it gets more ingrained in the organization and not just off somewhere off in the distance, if you will. You have to be relevant. You have to make yourself relevant and you have to show your value.
Hello and welcome to the Future Proof HR podcast, where we explore how the most forward-thinking HR leaders are navigating change, integrating technology, and building the workplaces of tomorrow, and ultimately thriving in the age of AI. I'm your host, Thomas Kunjappu, CEO of Cleary, and tonight it is my pleasure to bring along and invite Donna Beasley, the Vice President of Human Resources at Alumus. Based in Scottsdale, Arizona, Donna brings many years of progressive HR experience across government, healthcare, and, of course, in the private sector. Prior to Alumus, Donna led HR strategy for the city of Scottsdale, Maricopa County Public Works, and several private organizations as well, and has an expertise in workforce management, compliance, HR operations, and a particular interest in mentoring the next generation of HR leaders, which will be one of the topics we'll be talking about today, of course, because we want to think about how we can future-proof the whole profession. Donna, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, it's my pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's dive right into it. Can you tell me a little bit about your career from public sector to private sector, healthcare, like how you've navigated those shifts and what are the major types of sectors and industries you've worked in?
One great thing about human resources is it transcends all different types of industries and fields. So basically, I originally actually came from healthcare, then I was in retail, restaurants, and then I went to government for a couple of decades. And now I'm floating back over to the private side after I retired. But quite frankly, I have a family history of public service as well as social services. So it's always been in the blood. But yes, since I am drifting over to the private sector, it's been an interesting roundabout way of ending my career.
So you've had the opportunity to observe the profession by being in it, both over time chronologically, as well as you mentioned, across these very different types of organizations. So if you were to talk to us a bit about the evolution of HR, then when you were first getting into the field and how it's evolved now, what have been some of the biggest turning points?
Back when I started in human resources, I think it was called personnel management. And I had a major in personnel management. I ended up going into the major of sociology, which is the study of human behavior. But basically, human resources, they obviously teach you all the compliance information and the rules and what the laws are. And it wasn't so much strategy versus just transactional information that you were keeping the policy set and the laws, et cetera. So it actually evolved over a period of time. You have to change with the world. So obviously the world is getting more complex and organizations are getting more complex. So human resources had to get more complex. You had to find out exactly what employees are needing or what are they requesting, what makes them want to come to work every day. And once you get into that empowerment for employees, then you start building the strategy with the organization and you become that great business partner that people talk about all the time. So basically, the evolution came from transactional to strategic partner.
And then if we're going to keep that looking forward, how do you think that's shifting into the future?
With this new generation, I think I mentioned to you all before that they're looking for more than just coming to work 9 to 5, getting a paycheck, and then going home, et cetera. So they're much more into understanding what works for them, what hours works best for them. I know that sounds very interesting when they're going into a company and we're paying them, but the competition's fierce out there. Companies are starting to pay attention a little bit more and listen a little bit more about the needs of the employee, about their daycare needs, about the need for being at home and all those things, wellness, mental health. And we invest a lot of money in our benefits program for that reason. So when you start investing in employees the way that you should as a company, that's where they will give back to you and it makes everything better. They're happier employees and a better organization and better bottom line after that.
Generally speaking, the argument you're making is something that HR teams have been making with executive teams internally for several years as you've gone into a more strategic role, as you've mentioned, from just making sure that these folks get paid properly and making sure the paperwork and compliance is right, which obviously is very important. That's usually a great story when times are good, right? When the economy is great and the CEO and the CFO and the board are all aligned about growth or things are looking up and to the right. And of course, we need to engage and hold on to good people and invest in them, is effectively what you're saying through various means. How do you think about doing that when times are difficult? Or which I know a lot of folks out there are going through, right? Depending on what industry you're in. How does that conversation with the executive team kind of work when you have these tough trade-offs?
It truly depends on the organization. I know that a lot of organizations have values on the wall and they always say, put people first, et cetera. But hopefully you're with an organization. Luckily, I am with an organization that does consider people first. And when that happens, it's very easy to have those conversations with executives as far as what the employees are feeling, what they're going through, what programs that we might need to put in place that might benefit them. Or do we need to look at our benefits structure to see if we need to expand it? Do we need pet insurance? Are more people interested in that? So even when in the tough times, that's when you have to pay a little bit more close attention because people still need a paycheck and people still would like to come to work because they feel passionate about what they do and they're passionate about their company. So if you have all of that working together, it doesn't matter about the tough times, they'll be there for you because you're there for them.
That's a great point. But then I know we were talking before, Donna, and I know a big piece of getting these programs through and implemented in practice is really about creating that trust with the executive team, right? That creates a space for you to be that partner. So, how do you do that? Because I think that's ultimately a big struggle. It's said in many ways we need a seat at the table, or hey, the executive team is just looking to me to do the administrative work and get out of the way, or that's the message between the lines, or hey, this is an interesting program but we need to do X first, right? Something tactical or something simple, that's what we need your team to focus on first. How do you build that trust and those relationships with your, and we can talk about it across executive teams right throughout your career, so that you have the space to both present and then ultimately successfully implement these programs?
I've written something called the 3 C's, and I use that in everything that I do. It's customer service, compliance, and collaboration. So basically, when you are trying to further your agenda, if you will, if you see a good program that you'd like to implement, you're trying to talk to the executives about it. Number one, they have to see it as fiscally responsible. And hopefully, when you have your budget, that you're not blowing it on things that are frivolous and things that makes your office pretty or whatever the case may be, but you're actually utilizing that budget the way that you need to, and they see that. So therefore, they're not afraid that you're spending the money inappropriately. So that's one way to establish trust. Another one is getting to know the different business lines, not just sticking in HR behind your wall, but actually getting out there, meeting people, understanding their strategy of what their pain points are. Because once you learn a little bit more about their organization, and once they see that you're interested, then they'll be more easier to talk to you about. They'll trust you a little bit more, and they'll also share some ideas with you. For instance, there was a person or a department that was needing an extra person for a project. And in talking to a few other department heads, I found out that somebody was getting ready to get laid off. Did they have the right skill set to help that other department? They did. So again, getting to know the folks, making sure that they understand what your strategy is, making sure they understand that you're trying to do what's best for the organization and you have the financial backing to do it. And they have the financial backing to help you. And with that collaboration, you usually can go far. And that's how I was able to implement a lot of programs.
Is there an example that you would like to share about an employee engagement practice or any kind of HR program that you've put into place that kind of is representative of what you're talking about?
There's tons of programs that I put into place: performance evaluation, human resources information systems, applicant tracking systems. I will mention, if we're talking specifically about employee engagement, there is a software out there, and I'm not going to say the name, that I instituted in the city of Scottsdale that highlighted people's accomplishments. It gave kudos. It announced anniversaries. If people felt comfortable with providing anniversaries, provided happy birthdays, and it gave the organization a chance to reach out to different people. People could interact with each other online in chat rooms, et cetera, share ideas with each other. And we were also providing incentives. for utilizing that type of software. They could get little bonus points and buy gift cards and things of that nature. I was pretty proud of that program because people that normally wouldn't have talked to someone from a different area, they were able to engage and talk to each other. So I think that was probably the best software I ever bought.
Oh, that's great. So let's talk about the future a little bit more explicitly. I know you are in multiple states and there's compliance complexity, which is just increasing for most organizations from an HR perspective earlier in their life cycle. But then obviously we can't ignore AI and software and technology. You mentioned the generational expectations with being like a key factor. If you put all these things in the blender and you look ahead, what does a function look like in the future? A few years down the line, what is different, do you think, or what will be different about what HR really is?
That's a loaded question. I do feel that people will always need an element of human resources. But when people hopefully get more connected to each other and managers are starting to listen a little bit more and not just observe the bottom line, but actually why this person is interested in coming to work and what's going on in their lives without getting too personal with them. It's about that pure connection. And eventually, I hope that more people will invest in understanding their employees a little bit better. And then there won't be so many disciplinary issues and there won't be so many employee relations investigations. But again, I think just trend wise, besides artificial intelligence and all the rest of the wonderful bells and whistles, you'll still need that people element. And you never want to lose that people element. And if anything, human resources remind you that you need that people element, which is why they call it human resources.
So then how are you thinking about in like you like in your organization, but also like in your peer set, like how are you thinking about leveraging AI specifically, I guess two pronged. So first of all, within the world of HR, right? How are you seeing that evolving? But also you're in a particular industry where there's patient care and there are so many applications like within healthcare, but what's the conversation like in your industry about AI application overall?
Our CEO is a big fan of AI, and he charged all of the department heads and leaders to use AI as much as we can responsibly, of course, that to try it out and see how it can fit into our different organizations. And so I challenged my team, my HR team with that. And they came back with some interesting things, job descriptions, for instance. Instead of us trying to look them up or research them or trying to get more information from the manager as far as what the skills that they need, we type that into the AI tool. They spit out the job description. We send it over to the manager, just make sure that's correct. And 99.9% of the time, it's spot on. The qualifications and the years of experience, all of those things are correct. So that's one thing that's just got taken off our plates as far as that research is concerned. In our recruiting area, we're looking for different, more exciting ways to put a job posting together. And we asked IA. I think the main thing is that you have to be very specific about what you're looking for when you are chatting with AI. And once we did that for the job postings, it came back fantastic. We put in the location, we put in certain benefits that we have, we put in certain criteria that we were looking for in the job. And it was very fluid and it was perfect. So we posted it that way. Very simple policy that we need to look up really quickly. We can send it to AI and they'll spit it out. And it's usually correct. Obviously, we need to check with the state and make sure that it's in compliance and all of that. But usually the transactional things that we do are the things that we can just take off our plate quickly. AI has taken that over for us, and that's been a game changer for us.
Yeah, I love this. It seems like I hear this pattern all the time. It just seems like if in 2025 you're not using some kind of AI to help you write job descriptions, because that's like a very low barrier to entry to just even engage with this kind of technology, you're definitely being like left behind. It's an easy, low stakes way to try these things, right? Because it's obviously not given, it's just writing and it's something that you can edit, of course. And also you'll have a process outside of it with human checks as like a very simple entry point. I love those examples that you've given. On my second question, so I assume if you say that's something your CEO cares a lot about, is it fair to say similar type of experiments, innovation across the organization from like product to customer service to operations, where everyone is looking at different ways to do this in healthcare?
Yes, matter of fact, in information technology, they're using AI for phishing. They put in specific information to the AI tool and even used our CEO's name. And it spit out a very convincing phishing email that we sent out to the organization just to, as a training, to make sure that no one got caught and that they were paying attention to the special emails,
Mm.
name and all that kind of stuff. You got people using it in different ways. As far as healthcare is concerned, you can't just strictly use AI, obviously, but it's sometimes the combination of AI and the human interaction. For instance, if we're trying to help a patient and they're needing a certain pharmacy or pharmaceutical goods, we may be asking AI about the type. But then again, at the human element, we probably need to get more information or make it a little bit more sophisticated as far as what exactly the patient is looking for. So sometimes, especially in healthcare, it has to be a combination of AI plus the human element.
Which is a little bit similar to the simple job description use case that you mentioned, right? Where you have the AI to help you, and then the human or a manager, like the recruiter or the manager, then checks it and then goes forward, which is like an emerging workflow. If you put these pieces together, there is some level of anxiety, I think, society wide. Certainly for employees, when they ask, "Oh, is this going to take over my job?" What, if any, do you think is the function or the role of HR in addressing these concerns?
I think it frees people up to do other tasks that are even more explosive or important, etc. If we take away those transitional basic questions that we ask AI to take care of, that doesn't necessarily take away somebody's job, but it might expand it to do something else. I mentioned to you when we first started about foundations. Once you have that basic foundation down, you can start building from it with the programs, etc., and you can get really creative and grow. So without having those transactional duties, you can pave your way to do something more special for your organization. So I don't think it's going to take away a job.
Is that message landing though? There's all types of people in the world and like different folks in different stages in their careers and in different functions. I don't know, willingness to experiment and learn and reskill. As you think about like your org or just companies in this moment in time and you like look ahead, how much of this is going to mean that everyone is going to like reskill in their kind of job and now they've basically replaced themselves versus it's going to somehow lead to a bigger like labor market disruption almost.
It is like technology ever evolving, and that means people have to evolve too. Does that mean that I might have to go back to school to not necessarily get a degree, but another certification? Or do I need to take a different course to learn something that might expand my current position? So it makes you look a little bit more internally of how I can be of worth in this evolution of technology and AI. So hopefully people will think about it that way. And it's not only just supposed to make us better AI wise, but it's supposed to make us better personally that we want to grow and that we want to learn and we want to build that kind of thing. So it really is up to the individual on whether or not they want to embrace and expand their knowledge and their learning power.
Let's go back to what you just talked about, laying this foundation. So this is okay, we're thinking about the future, but ultimately there's some just nuts and bolts, right, in terms of what you need to be enabling with an HR function for the organization. Can you walk us through your approach of laying a solid foundation in HR? Like you're coming into an organization for the first time, seeing what's what. Like, what do you do?
That goes back to the three C's that I talked about, and that's under compliance. So when I first get to the organization, compliance is number one in my head. Of course, collaboration, customer service, and all that great stuff. But I want to make sure that we're not illegally in trouble. Okay. So what I usually do is I have a very specific HR audit, and it's all written down. It goes through the different functions, the policies, the programs of human resources. And I just go down the list and check everything in the organization under human resources to see if it's compliant. Now, if I find things that are out of compliance or not compliant, I transpose that into an action plan. And what I've called it before is like a 30, 60, 90-day action plan. And you just work the plan and you start with what's the most critical thing that needs to be corrected. And then you educate your team, what the plan looks like. And not only that, you educate your superiors, your executive teams, your leadership teams, your managers, let them know what you're doing and why. And that's another way of building trust and buy-in and all that great stuff because they can see physically that you're working to try to make the organization not just compliant, but better. So that's usually the first thing that I would do when I enter the organization. And depending on the organization or the depth of whether or not they are out of compliance and how bad it might be out of compliance. That eventually it usually takes me 6 months to a year to finish the checklist.
It makes sense to start there, especially when you're coming into a new organization. And it almost makes me ask the question, should HR be innovative? Like what you're really enabling is the organization to basically not be sued, to be compliant, and to ensure that at the most basic level, you are honoring your contracts with your employees. And because of that, ultimately have a good employer brand and you're able to recruit and engage and retain good talent. Is it right that HR should not be innovative so that you can just ensure those basics are held together? Or are there trade offs in that mindset?
You can be innovative even in the checklist. Okay. Even when you are looking at their job descriptions, et cetera. I know that they have to have the basic knowledge, skills, abilities, information in it, but is it compelling enough or understood enough by the employer, by someone in the public? And do we need to make it a little bit more exciting or different? I know that's what sometimes job postings are for, but job description can do the same thing too. It doesn't have to be mundane and boring. You can be innovative in almost anything that you do, as long as you have the desire and you have leadership that is supportive of wanting to be innovative and you have an environment that is fostering that, then innovation doesn't just stop. It's everywhere and it's anywhere.
I'll take an extreme example, right? An employee contract is not something maybe you need to innovate necessarily, right? Or the process with which you do data entry into an HRIS, it needs to be like 100% accurate, not something that you need to be like innovating on and figuring out new ways to do that on a consistent quarterly basis or something. And is that mindset more of what organizations need from HR? Or is that like just taking the compliance part of the role too far?
Compliance doesn't have to be completely boring. Even in the data entry, even in making sure information is correct, even in the offer letters, obviously they have to be compliant, they have to follow the law, they have to hold up in court, all of those wonderful things. Innovation doesn't mean it has to be this big grand thing. It can be the smallest of things. So I would challenge anyone to say that there isn't one thing that you could be slightly innovative with. You don't necessarily have to go crazy and throw it out and try something extreme, but thinking differently is the core. That's how I think you become interesting. That's how you show value in your organization, that you're just not the mundane 8 to 5, coffee break, go to work, all that stuff. I don't think there's anything that you couldn't be innovative for and do. So no matter the very basics that you were talking about.
Yeah, so actually that brings to this point just about the young talent in HR and mentoring or just growing talent. There's been a lot of stories about just burnout in the function, of course, on one extreme, but I think maybe I'd like to talk about it more in the sense of advice you might have to folks who are trying to get in to the function or who will be leaders in HR in the future. Given everything we just talked about around how there are a lot of shifts and there have been shifts and there continue to be shifts into the future, what kind of advice would you give to someone young for the next generation of like HR leaders? What's most critical for them?
I would ask them, why are they interested in human resources? Sometimes when I've asked that question, I get answers like, I really like people. Quite frankly, if that's the reason that you want to be in human resources, then you probably shouldn't be in human resources. You probably should be in social services, some other type of social work or psychology or something.
I feel like everyone says that. That's the classic thing that's said.
It is. And that's the one thing that I try to educate people about, that it's so much more than just liking people. I want to make sure that if someone's coming into the organization new in HR, that they are treating everyone with the same dignity and respect, no matter their position. I know sometimes you might hear organizations have human resources just for management. They're just there to advise management. That's a function, and that's very true, and that's very important. But we're here for everyone, the whole organization. That gender shouldn't have any less professionalism or respect or service that you give to him or her versus a senior manager. So obviously priorities change, and the CEO comes in and say, Don, I need this right away. Of course, I'm going to make sure he gets it right away. But that doesn't change the fact that you are there for everybody and not just a specific group. So I think I would really like that profession or that person, that professional, to understand that before they decide human resource is the career for me? Can they be that person for everyone and not just one specific group?
Got it. And then I think you're saying that when people think about I'm a people person, that translates really into too often working one on one with people. It's with people, but it's with an entire organization.
True. And when I hear people person, it sounds like to me that they want to be very empathetic and they want to help them and they want to make sure that things are being taken care of personally and all that kind of stuff. And that's great. And some elements of human resources can do those types of things, but there's a balance because you never know. You might be sitting across with that person that you helped one day, and then you're having to have the discussion with the manager about possible termination. So that's why that professionalism comes into play, that you have to treat everyone with that respect. So no matter what the situation is or what they do or what they come with you with, that's your foundation, that professionalism and that customer service and that making sure that you're approachable. And but people know that when it comes to the hard decisions that you're not afraid to make them and they respect you for it in the end.
Right. You need to have that balance, that metal to think about not just this person in front of me, but the people and the organization as well at the same time. And I think that kind of goes and connects in with your previous point about building trust with the executive team to be able to put in programs that are useful and are pro employee. That kind of comes from being able to work with the executive team and gain their trust because you understand the processes, the organization at large, which is very different from, or it's a skill adjacent to, let's call it, being a people person.
I've told people over and over again, I've never had my car key. I've never been threatened, nothing like that. Because again, when you're treating everyone, and if you have the reputation of treating everyone with respect, and they know that no matter, who you are or what position you are, Donna's going to make sure that you get your questions answered and that you have the correct information. It doesn't matter as far as who you are or what you
Okay,
do.
so
So
Donna,
that's when we build that trust also.
that makes sense. So you said something, I'm so curious. So you said I had my car keyed, which is in some ways I get exactly where you're coming from, right? Because they're the kinds of decisions, and in HR you are the face for many decisions. They're tough, right? And you're in that position where you can really build up like negative sentiment, and because of that, there's even, I would say, a broader reputational question, right, for the function at large. How do you think about that? Just the reputation of HR within your org, obviously, which you can represent really well, as you mentioned, the respect that you bring to every individual. But then if you zoom out and think about just the industry wide perception, is that getting better, worse, shifting in any kind of way? You have any thoughts on that?
It really starts with leadership, not just in the organization, the country. I don't want to get political or anything like that, but it really depends on the way the world evolves, what changes are being made, what services might be introduced or cut. That's where the resiliency comes into play with human resources as a profession, because no matter what, as I mentioned in the beginning, we transcend all different types of industries. So we have to be resilient. We have to be able to make that pivot turn in a moment's notice if needed, as far as providing the executives or whomever with the best recommendation of how we should move forward with a specific program or what programs might need to get cut, et cetera. As I said, it starts with leadership, whatever that leadership looks like.
And the reputation for HR is probably really just an extension of that shadow, right? Within a particular organization.
True. Hopefully, you have leaders that believe in the people, not just the bottom line. And if you are experiencing that disconnect, then you may have to rethink whether or not you're truly bringing value to that organization. And that's what made me stay in organizations. If I am able to see my value, if they're able to see my value, if we together can grow the organization based on those principles of integrity and values, all those basic things that you need in order to be successful. That's been my secret.
There you go. Secrets out. Just one more question before we get into the lightning round. If you're just looking ahead, what do you think represents the future of HR as a profession?
Again, getting more ingrained in the organization, not just having HR up on a hill somewhere behind an office, but putting them in different areas in the organization, having business partners in various departments and not necessarily just closed up in one particular area, becoming ingrained in that organization, finding out what their pain points, their strategic plan, and finding ways that you can show your value and maybe even provide your opinion or you can help solve a problem that they've been looking at. That's how human resource, I believe, will survive if it gets more ingrained in the organization and not just off somewhere off in the distance, if you will. You have to be relevant. You have to make yourself relevant and you have to show your value.
Got it. Okay, so with that said, Donna, are we ready to get into our 30 seconds or less lightning round?
I will try my best.
All right, so what is a piece of career advice you've received that you'd be willing to share with everyone today?
I had a CEO a long time ago tell me that anytime you have an issue or a problem, Donna, always come up with three solid solutions. Okay. That way it forces you to think of the problem holistically and in different opinions. And when you provide a solution and talking to whomever you need to talk to, you can pull from different examples, you can pull a different way of looking at things and it might bring a different perspective. So every time I have a problem or issue, or if I have a solution, I think of it three ways, or how can I solve it in three ways?
I love that. In fact, even thinking of solving it even in one way is great advice because it just at least forces you to contend with the problem versus putting it on someone else's plate. Great advice. What is one HR trend you think might define the next decade?
As we mentioned before, artificial intelligence, I think that's going to be even more and more prevalent. And I know we were talking about it in a more positive way. There's a lot of scammers out there that's using it for making people's lives very difficult financially, et cetera. So looking at it very closely, it's a friend, but understanding that it could be very dangerous if you're not looking correctly.
That's a great point. We're from the Valley of the Sun. If someone's visiting the greater Phoenix area, what's a favorite place that you have that you might recommend someone to check out?
The Valley of the Sun is wonderful. One of my go-tos is Sedona. I love the red rocks and it's just much solitude and relaxation and unwinding. So I like Sedona.
And it's not that far. It's very
Yeah.
worth it. I've done exactly that. I know exactly what you mean. That feeling, uh, you, red rocks, and wide open skies. If you could wave a magic wand and get rid of one annoying or tactical or ongoing HR task that the industry wide we would not have to do anymore, what might that be?
That's a hard one. That's because even the things that gets on my nerves and I'm not crazy about, you still have to do them. I really don't think I have one particular thing that I'd like to waive and get rid of because that's why I'm in the human resources. I like all of it.
What if it could just happen automatically for you and it still gets done, but it's just not something you have to deal with?
If you want to know the truth, garnishments, I can't stand doing garnishments.
Oh gosh, that's a lot of detailed calculations. You can't get it
It really
wrong, and not to mention, it's not a situation you want to be in.
sure. My employees are the ones that actually do it, but sometimes they ask me to help them, and I'll of course help them if they need help. But I'm not a fan of garnishment.
Fair. Now, is there a piece of media like book, podcast, resource, anything that you've consumed lately that you might recommend to an audience of other HR practitioners?
This is going to sound really awful, but the one that I was thinking of actually was recorded in the 50s. I don't know if you've ever heard "The Strangest Secret" by Earl Nightingale.
I have not.
Okay. So I highly recommend it. Yes, it's dated since it was done in the 50s, but if you get past that some of the misogynistic terms that they use and really truly listen to the message, it will change your life. And I did, and I listened to it maybe 25 years ago, and it really changed my life, my trajectory. So I won't give it away, but if
Okay.
you have the moment, "The Strangest Secret" by Earl Nightingale, and follow it, and it has a project at the end that you would actually do, a 30-day test, if you will, and you just repeat that test, and you'll be able to do anything that you ever wanted to do.
Oh, I'll add that to the show notes. That's a great one. And with all that said, thank you so much, Donna. This is an absolute pleasure exploring the future of HR from different lenses with you here today. So that's it for the episode today for Future Proof HR. Thank you again for sharing your perspective and expertise on the evolving role of HR. And we talked a lot about foundation building and how you can unlock trust with executives and be focused on being a people person, but you have to balance that with knowledge of the business and working with the executive team. And so this approach of thinking about the three C's I thought was really interesting. And it's a way to think about how you might, anyone, if you're going into a new role, I think about how you might onboard it into it. There's a lot of change ahead, but it's going to take all of us to really think about how we can innovate on the things that matter, which we talked about a lot, and the things that should be innovating on, not the least of which is engaging in conversations about AI and with the workforce and within HR itself and with the broader leadership teams. So thank you for this conversation and contribution to helping future-proof HR.
It was my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Thank you, everyone out there. Till next time, this is Thomas signing off. Bye now. Hey, it's Thomas again. One quick question before you go. Are you and your HR team tired of answering the same employee questions again and again in Slack? If yes, our Cleary AI-powered Slack bot is here to help. It takes routine employee requests and answers it automatically while freeing up time for you to take on more important tasks. At the same time, it automatically builds up an HR knowledge base as you go. It's quick to set up, works right in Slack, and you can try it for free. Just head on over to gocleary.com/HR-chatbot to install it. It's, again, gocleary.com/HR-chatbot. Thanks again.